The crystal glasses clinked with champagne as Michael Bennett rose from his seat at the head table. His weathered hands gripped the microphone, trembling slightly. Not from age, but from the weight of what he carried in his inside pocket. His daughter Katherine beamed at him, radiant in white lace, while her new husband Jason smiled confidently beside her. The perfect couple. The perfect lie. Michael's eyes drifted to the manila envelope on the table. Inside lay a marriage certificate and a photograph, evidence of a past Jason had buried, of a wife he claimed was dead. The father cleared his throat, scanning the decorated barn until he found her standing in the shadows by the exit. Alive. Watching. Could he really destroy his daughter's happiest day to expose the truth? But what would hurt more? The revelation now, or the inevitable discovery later? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra, special for you. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of the bridal suite, casting delicate patterns across Katherine's face as she sat before the antique vanity. Her bridesmaids fluttered around her like butterflies in their lavender dresses, their laughter light and infectious. Katherine's hands rested on the small wooden music box beside her, a childhood treasure her father had given her on her 10th birthday. She ran her fingers over the carved roses, remembering how it had played Clair de Lune while a tiny ballerina twirled inside. Something old, her maid of honor Sarah announced, gently placing the pearl earrings that had belonged to Katherine's mother in her palm. In the adjacent guest room, Michael Bennett adjusted his bow tie, his movements mechanical as his mind drifted. The call he'd received yesterday afternoon still echoed in his thoughts. A woman's voice, hesitant yet determined. "Mr. Bennett, you don't know me, but I need to speak with you about Jason Coulter before he marries your daughter." He had hung up, dismissing it as a prank or a jealous ex. But something in her tone had lodged in his chest like a splinter. Michael opened his wallet and touched the faded photograph of his late wife Elizabeth. 15 years gone, and still he sought her guidance. "What would you do, Lizzie?" he whispered. "Our little girl is all grown up now." A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Dad, are you ready?" Katherine stood in the doorway, not yet in. Her wedding dress, but radiant nonetheless in her silk robe. Her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist. "Almost, sweetheart." He smiled, pushing aside his unease. "You look just like your mother." Katherine crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, her familiar scent of vanilla and roses enveloping him. "I wish she was here." "She is," Michael assured her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. She wouldn't have missed this for the world. Later, as he made his way downstairs to greet early arrivals, Michael noticed Jason's parents huddled in conversation near the garden entrance. Margaret Coulter clutched her husband Robert's arm, her face pinched with worry. When she caught Michael's eye, she quickly plastered on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Michael," Robert extended his hand. "Beautiful day for a wedding." "Perfect," Michael agreed, noting the slight tremor in Robert's grip. "Everything all right?" "Of course," Margaret interjected too quickly. "Just wedding day jitters. Parents get them too, you know." As they excused themselves, Michael's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text message from an unknown number. "I'll be at the reception, back left corner. If you want the truth about who your daughter is really marrying, find me. Elena." The name sent a chill through him. Elena. The same name the private investigator had mentioned in his report. The name of Jason's supposedly deceased wife. Michael slipped the phone back into his pocket as the wedding planner approached, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Bennett, we have a slight issue with the seating arrangement." He nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. The music box melody played in his head, a dissonant warning tune now, rather than the sweet lullaby of Katherine's childhood. Michael had always prided himself on protecting his daughter, stepping into both parental roles after Elizabeth's death. He'd chased away nightmares, intimidated unworthy boyfriends, and bandaged countless physical and emotional wounds. But this was different. If his suspicions were correct, no amount of fatherly protection could soften the blow that was coming. He glanced up at the bridal suite window, where Katherine's silhouette moved behind the curtains. His daughter, his only child, preparing for what should be the happiest day of her life. Michael squared his shoulders. Decision made. He would find this Elena at the reception. He would hear her out. And then, God help them all, he would do whatever was necessary to protect his daughter, even if it meant breaking her heart. 2 years earlier, autumn leaves danced across the cobblestone street outside Purgatory, the local coffee shop where Katherine spent most Saturday mornings grading papers. The bell above the door jingled as a gust of wind brought in a stranger, tall, with salt and pepper hair that belied his youthful face. When he ordered a plain black coffee, Katherine smiled at his simplicity amid the menu's pretentious concoctions. "Just coffee? How refreshingly honest," she remarked, tucking her red pen behind her ear. He turned, surprise giving way to an appreciative grin. In a world of caramel macchiato half-calf soy lattes, someone has to maintain standards. They talked until her stack of ungraded essays became a problem for Monday Katherine. Before leaving, he handed her a receipt with his number scrawled on the back. "Jason Coulter," he'd said, "in case you'd like to continue this conversation over dinner." Katherine had kept that coffee receipt tucked in her wallet ever since, a small talisman of the moment her life changed course. 3 weeks later, she introduced Jason to her father over Sunday dinner. Michael had grilled steaks and asked pointed questions, as fathers do. "So what brings you to Spring Harbor?" Michael served the potato salad, studying Jason's body language. "A fresh start," Jason answered smoothly. "I was working in finance in Chicago, but after my wife died, I needed a change of scenery." Katherine had touched Jason's hand sympathetically. "Jason lost Elena to cancer last year." Michael's fork paused, midway to his mouth. "I'm sorry to hear that. I understand all too well what that's like." Jason nodded solemnly. "Katherine mentioned you lost your wife years ago. Sounds like we've walked similar paths." Something in Jason's demeanor, perhaps the practiced way he accepted condolences, triggered Michael's instincts. 25 years in law enforcement before retirement had honed his ability to detect rehearsed responses. But he pushed the thought aside, unwilling to judge a man on grief's presentation alone. Later that evening, after Jason left, Sarah had called Katherine. Michael overheard fragments of their conversation from the kitchen. "He seems perfect, but don't you think it's weird he has, like, zero social media presence?" Sarah's voice echoed through the speakerphone. "Not everyone broadcasts their life online," Katherine defended. "Besides, he said after Elena died, he deleted most of his accounts. Too painful seeing memories pop up." "Did he show you any pictures of her?" "No. And I haven't asked. Some wounds you don't probe, Sarah." Michael remembered how Elizabeth's death had rendered him mute on the subject for nearly a year. He couldn't fault Jason for similar reticence. Yet, as the relationship progressed, Jason's background remained frustratingly opaque. He spoke of college at Northwestern, but never mentioned classmates. His parents were traveling abroad for the first 8 months. Katherine dated him. His former colleagues were referenced only in vague anecdotes. At their engagement dinner, Jason had finally produced his parents, Robert and Margaret Coulter, who seemed pleasant enough but oddly unfamiliar with details of their son's first marriage. Elena was quiet, Margaret had offered when Katherine inquired. They married young. Too young, Robert added, earning a sharp glance from his wife. As Michael sat at the rehearsal dinner, these memories resurfaced with new significance. How had he missed so many red flags? The inconsistent stories about Jason's past, the convenient absence of childhood friends, the way he deflected personal questions with practiced charm. Michael fingered the business card in his pocket. Frank Delaney, private investigator, and recalled their meeting just 3 days ago. The file Delaney had compiled painted a very different picture of the man his daughter was about to marry. "Mr. Bennett," Delaney had said, sliding a photograph across the table, "I don't believe Elena Coulter is dead at all." 4 weeks before the wedding, Michael collected his mail after returning from his morning fishing trip. Among the bills and advertisements lay a plain white envelope with no return address. His name and address were printed in neat block letters, not handwritten but printed from a computer, professional, anonymous. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing 3 typed sentences. "Jason Coulter is not who he claims to be. His wife Elena is alive and living in Millridge. Protect your daughter." Michael stood in his kitchen, reading those words over and over until they blurred before his eyes. He set the letter on the counter, made himself a strong cup of coffee, and called Katherine. "Dad, I can't talk now. The florist just delivered the wrong centerpieces and just checking in, sweetheart," he interrupted, forcing normalcy into his voice. "Need any help with wedding preparations today?" "No, Jason's handling the DJ issue. He's been amazing. I'd be a complete mess without him." The happiness in her voice was unmistakable. "Love you, Dad. Gotta run." After they hung up, Michael stared at the unmarked envelope. It could be nothing: a jealous ex-girlfriend, a disgruntled former colleague, anyone with a grudge against Jason, or someone trying to sabotage Katherine's happiness out of spite. Yet the specificity troubled him. Millridge was a small town about 40 miles north. Easy enough to verify if someone lived there. Michael folded the letter and slipped it into his desk drawer. That evening, he poured a glass of bourbon and pulled out an old photo album. Katherine's. Childhood smiled back at him. Her first bicycle, missing front teeth, high school graduation. In every image, he saw Elizabeth's eyes looking back at him. "What would you do, Lizzie?" he whispered to the empty room. The next morning, Michael drove to Millridge. He spent 3 hours at the local diner, library and post office, casually, inquiring about an Elena Coulter. No one recognized the name. Relief and doubt battled within him until an elderly woman at the pharmacy mentioned that a new Elena had moved to town recently, but her last name was Vasquez, not Coulter. Back home, Michael retrieved the letter from his desk. He should throw it away, trust his daughter's judgment, yet doubt had taken root like a persistent weed. 3 days later, against his better judgment, Michael found himself sitting across from Frank Delaney, a former colleague from his days on the force, now working as a private investigator. "Just a background check," Michael explained, sliding a photo of Jason across the table. "Consider it a wedding gift to myself, peace of mind." Frank raised an eyebrow. "Most fathers just give toasters, Mike. Humor me." A week passed. Katherine called daily with wedding updates, seating charts, last-minute RSVPs, her excitement building. Each conversation twisted the knife of Michael's guilt deeper. When Frank finally called, his voice was grave. "We need to meet." They convened at a diner 30 miles out of town, where no one would recognize them. Frank placed a manila folder. On the table, Jason Coulter was born Jeremy Caldwell in Cincinnati. He married Elena Vasquez 8 years ago in Chicago. No death certificate for Elena exists. In fact, Frank slid a photograph across the table, dated just 2 weeks earlier. "She's very much alive." The image showed a beautiful Latina woman leaving a small cottage in Millridge. Michael's stomach dropped. "There's more," Frank continued. "Jeremy Caldwell disappeared after embezzling nearly $200,000 from his investment firm. Changed his name, created a new identity. He's done this before, Mike. Marries women from wealthy families, gains access to their accounts, then vanishes. Elena was lucky. She discovered his scheme before he cleaned her out completely." Michael stared at the photograph. "Does she know about Katherine?" "She's the one who sent you the letter," Frank confirmed quietly. "She's been tracking him, trying to warn his potential victims. Usually, they don't believe her." Michael closed the folder, his decision crystallizing. I need to meet her. 2 days later, Michael sat in Frank Delaney's cluttered office, surrounded by filing cabinets and the smell of stale coffee. The private investigator's file on Jason Coulter, or rather Jeremy Caldwell, lay open on the desk between them, thick with documents and photographs that told a damning story. I pulled every record I could find, Frank explained, spreading out the contents. The man's a professional con artist with a preference for educated, financially stable women with family money or inheritance. Michael examined a copy of Jeremy and Elena's marriage certificate dated 8 years prior. And the cancer story? Complete fabrication. The real Jeremy Caldwell's mother died of cancer when he was in college. He recycles personal tragedies for his marks, pulls the sympathy card. Frank tapped a document. He's officially still married to Elena Vasquez, never filed for divorce. So his marriage to Katherine would be bigamy, a felony in all 50 states. Frank nodded grimly. He's also wanted in Illinois for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. Michael picked up a mugshot from 6 years earlier, a younger version of the man his daughter planned to marry in 3 weeks. How does he keep getting away with this? He's careful, changes his appearance slightly each time, different hair, sometimes glasses or contacts to change eye color, creates new documentation through black market channels. Frank handed Michael a timeline. After the Elena situation, he disappeared for about a year, resurfaced in Portland as James Carson, got engaged to a doctor's daughter, then vanished, with her family's vacation fund. Then he was Tyler Manning in Dallas. Same pattern. Michael's throat tightened as he examined surveillance photos of Jason meeting with a man known to provide false identification documents. And now he's Jason. Coulter about to marry my Katherine. The parents are actors, Frank continued, hired to play the role for important events. They've worked with him at least twice before. Jesus. Michael ran a hand over his face. There's something else. Frank hesitated, then turned to the last page in the file. Financial records show he's already begun transferring small amounts. From Katherine's accounts to offshore holdings. Test runs, likely. Michael's hands shook with rage. The honeymoon, 2 weeks in Bali. Perfect opportunity to empty accounts and disappear. Frank nodded. Once they're out of the country, he'd have plenty of time to clean her out completely. Michael closed the file, unable to look at more evidence of the elaborate deception targeting his daughter. Why did Elena wait so long to come? Oh, forward. The wedding is in 3 weeks. She only tracked him down recently, been searching for years. He's good at covering his tracks. She wants to stop him before he hurts someone else, but she's also afraid of him. He threatened her when she confronted him in Chicago. Michael stared out the window, watching rain begin to fall. His cop instincts urged him to call the authorities immediately, have Jason arrested at the next opportunity. But the father in him ached at the thought of Katherine's heartbreak, the public humiliation, the gossip that would follow. I need to tell Katherine privately, Michael decided, before the wedding. Give her a chance to process this away from prying eyes. Frank looked skeptical, and if she doesn't believe you? These guys are masters at manipulation, Mike. He'll have a plausible explanation for everything, paint Elena as the crazy ex, convince Katherine that any evidence is fabricated. Then what do you suggest? Confront him with irrefutable evidence. In public, where he can't wiggle out of it. Frank leaned forward. Elena is willing to appear in person. With her there, his marriage certificate, the proof of his identity fraud, he won't be able to talk his way out. Michael pictured the scenario. The reception in chaos, Katherine's face crumpling in shock and betrayal, guests whispering. His stomach turned. I need to meet Elena first, he said finally. Hear her story directly. Frank nodded, scribbling an address on a notepad. She's expecting you tomorrow at noon. Just prepare yourself, Mike. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The cottage at the end of Maple Lane in Millridge looked like something from a fairy tale. White with blue shutters, a small garden bursting with late summer flowers. Michael sat in his car, gathering courage. This unassuming house contained a woman who shared something profound with him. They had both been deceived by the same man. Elena Vasquez opened the door before he could knock. She was younger than he expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with dark eyes that carried the weariness of someone who had seen too much deception. "Mr. Bennett," she said simply, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." Inside, the cottage was sparsely furnished, but immaculate. Elena gestured toward the small kitchen table where 2 cups of coffee waited. As she sat across from him, Michael noticed the gold band still on her left ring finger, a physical reminder of her unbroken marriage to the man now calling himself Jason Coulter. "I wasn't sure you would believe me," Elena began, her accent slight but noticeable. "Most don't until it's too late." "I almost didn't," Michael admitted. "How long were you married before?" 3 years. "I thought we were happy." She twisted the ring absently. "I was a financial advisor at a small firm in Chicago. Jason. He was charming, attentive. We met at a charity event. 6 months later, we were married." Michael noticed a framed photo on the wall. Eleanor, in a white dress, Jeremy beside her, both beaming at the camera. The same smile he now directed at Katherine. "When did you realize something was wrong?" "When client funds started disappearing at my firm. At first, small amounts, then larger sums. I was the primary suspect until security footage showed Jeremy accessing the system using my credentials." Her voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened around her coffee cup. "By then, he had already transferred most of our savings to accounts I couldn't access. He disappeared the same day the investigation began." Michael's jaw tightened. "And the police?" "Filed reports, issued warrants, but Jeremy knows how to vanish." She met Michael's gaze directly. "I've been tracking him for 5 years. Dallas, Portland, now Spring Harbor. Always the same pattern. He finds a woman with access to money, creates a tragic backstory to gain sympathy, integrates himself into her life, then disappears with whatever he can take." "How did you find him this time?" "Social media. Your daughter's friend posted engagement photos. I recognized him immediately, despite the different hair, the glasses." Elena pulled out her phone, showing Michael the Instagram post. Katherine and Jason at their engagement party, her diamond ring prominently displayed. "Why not go to the police again?" "I tried. But without proof he's in town using a specific identity. They won't act on old warrants. They need to catch him in the act." She sighed. "By then, it's too late for his victims." "What do you want from me, Elena?" "I want to stop him. Not just for your daughter, but for the next woman. And the next," she leaned forward. "I'll be at the wedding. When you're ready to confront him, I'll step forward as living proof of his lies." Michael studied her face, searching for ulterior motives. "This won't be easy for you." "Nothing about the past 5 years has been easy, Mr. Bennett." She removed the wedding ring, placing it on the table between them. "I keep wearing this to remind myself of the promise I made, not to him, but to myself, that I wouldn't let him hurt anyone else if I could prevent it." The simple dignity in her voice convinced Michael more than any evidence could have. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice and protection. "I need to think about how to handle this," he said finally. "Katherine deserves to know the truth, but the timing—" He trailed off, imagining his daughter's devastation. "The timing will never be good," Eleanor said gently. "But finding out before the wedding is better than discovering it after he's cleaned out her accounts and disappeared." As Michael rose to leave, Elena handed him a small envelope. "My contact information and copies of our marriage certificate and police reports. Whatever you decide, I'll support it." Michael took the envelope, his resolve hardening. "I'll be in touch." The pre-wedding dinner filled the private room at Riverstone Inn with laughter and conversation. Crystal glasses sparkled under chandeliers, while waiters circulated with trays of appetizers. Michael observed it all as if watching a play, hyper-aware of the performance unfolding before him. Jason moved through the room with practiced ease, charming Katherine's elderly aunts, discussing football with her cousins, complimenting her mother's sister on her earrings. He was the perfect fiancé, attentive, engaging, seemingly transparent, a complete fabrication. "You look troubled." Katherine's godmother, Diane, appeared at Michael's side. "Pre-wedding jitters for Dad." Michael forced a smile. "Just thinking about Elizabeth. Wishing she could see Katie now. She'd be proud." Diane squeezed his arm. "You did well, raising her alone." Across the room, Katherine caught his eye and waved him over. She stood with Jason and his parents, the hired actors playing their roles flawlessly. "Dad, look what Jason's parents brought." Katherine held out a small velvet box. Inside nestled a pair of silver cufflinks engraved with the Bennett family. Crest. A thoughtful, personalized gift that must have required research and planning. "These are remarkable," Michael said, meeting Robert Coulter's gaze. Did the man know he was aiding a con artist, or was he merely another pawn? "Family tradition," Robert explained smoothly. "The father of the bride should have something special for the big day." "I tracked down your family crest," Jason added, his hand resting on Katherine's waist. "Wanted to make sure they got it right." The calculated nature of the gift chilled Michael. How long had Jason been planning this? The cufflinks weren't just a present, they were a prop in an elaborate performance designed to cement his place in the family. "Thank you," Michael managed, pocketing the box. "I'll wear them with pride tomorrow." The dinner progressed to toasts. Katherine's maid of honor reminisced about their college days. Jason's best man, another actor, told amusing stories of adventures that had never happened. Finally, Jason himself stood, champagne flute raised. "To new beginnings," he said, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Katherine with practiced adoration. "And to leaving the past behind. Tomorrow I gain not just a wife, but the family I've always wished for." The irony wasn't lost on Michael. Jason was indeed leaving his past behind, along with his real name, his legal wife, and his criminal record. As dessert was served, Michael attempted to maneuver Jason into a private conversation, but the younger man expertly avoided, being cornered, always keeping Katherine or another guest as a buffer. When Michael finally managed to approach him alone by the bar, Jason's phone conveniently rang. "Sorry, Michael. The DJ with last-minute questions. I'll be right back." Michael watched him step outside, the perfect concerned groom handling wedding details. The performance was flawless. No wonder Katherine had fallen for it. Later, as guests began to depart, Katherine found her father on the terrace, staring into the darkness. "Everything okay, Dad? You've been quiet tonight." Michael turned to his daughter, heart aching at her happiness. Her eyes shone with excitement for tomorrow, her future stretching bright before her, a future built on lies. "Just sentimental," he said, pulling her into a hug. "My little girl, all grown up." "I'll always be your little girl," Katherine promised, resting her head against his shoulder like she had done since childhood, even after tomorrow. Over her shoulder, Michael saw Jason watching them from the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a moment, their eyes locked in silent understanding. Jason knew Michael suspected something. The slight narrowing of his eyes, the barely perceptible tensing of his shoulders, these were tells Michael recognized from years in law enforcement. The game was on, and Jason knew it. "Get some rest, sweetheart," Michael said, kissing Katherine's forehead. "Tomorrow's going to be a big day." Katherine squeezed his hand. "I'm so happy, Dad. Jason is everything I've ever wanted." Michael watched her return to her fiancé, who wrapped an arm around her shoulders, possessively. As they left together, Michael fingered the cufflinks in his pocket, symbols of family tradition and honor, given by a man who respected neither. Tomorrow would indeed be a big day, but not for the reasons Katherine imagined. St. Andrew's Church stood resplendent in the afternoon sunlight, its stained glass windows casting kaleidoscope patterns across the marble floor. Flowers adorned every pew, white roses and lavender, Katherine's choices. Guests filled the sanctuary, programs in hand, whispering in anticipation. Michael stood in the vestibule, studying the wedding program. Under "In Loving Memory" were listed Elizabeth Bennett and Elena and Richard Coulter, Jason's supposedly deceased wife and father. The audacity of the lie made Michael's blood boil. Elena's real father was very much alive in Arizona. She had shown Michael photos during their meeting. "Ready, Mr. Bennett?" The wedding coordinator appeared, clipboard in hand. Michael nodded, tucking the program into his jacket pocket next to the envelope containing the evidence he'd gathered. He had decided, after a sleepless night, to wait until the reception. Better to have the legal ceremony interrupted than to create a scene in the church. The music began, and Michael took his position. Katherine appeared at the end of the aisle, radiant in her mother's restored wedding gown. Despite everything, Michael's throat tightened with emotion. She was beautiful, poised on the threshold of what she believed was her happy future. As he walked her down the aisle, Michael's eyes found Jason waiting at the altar. The younger man looked appropriately moved by Katherine's appearance, his eyes convincingly bright with unshed tears. What kind of person could maintain such deception? Could he possibly have genuine feelings for Katherine beneath the con? "Who gives this woman to be married?" the minister asked when they reached the altar. Michael hesitated, the words sticking in his throat. This was his moment to object, to end the charade before it went any further. Katherine looked at him, a flicker of concern crossing her face at his delay. "Her mother and I do," he finally said, placing Katherine's hand in Jason's before stepping back to his seat. The ceremony proceeded with agonizing beauty. Vows were exchanged, rings blessed and placed on fingers. When the minister asked if anyone knew of any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, Michael's hand twitched toward his pocket. He caught Jason watching him, a hint of wariness beneath his smile. Michael remained silent, his decision made. A public accusation now would be Katherine's permanent memory of her wedding day. At the reception, he could manage the revelation, with more privacy, more dignity for his daughter. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Michael scanned the back of the church. There, in the last row, partially hidden by a column, stood Elena Vasquez, dressed in a simple blue dress, her expression stoic as she watched her legal husband kiss another woman. Their eyes met briefly across the church. Elena gave a small nod, confirmation that she would follow through with their plan at the reception. The recessional music swelled as the newlyweds moved down the aisle, Katherine's face glowing with happiness. Michael fell into step with one of the bridesmaids, mechanical in his movements. Outside the church, guests gathered for photographs. Michael maintained his role, smiling for cameras, shaking hands with well-wishers, playing the proud father. All the while he watched Jason, noting how the man kept glancing around, scanning the crowd with subtle vigilance. He knew something was coming. During a brief moment alone, as the wedding party prepared to depart for the reception venue, Jason approached Michael. "Beautiful ceremony," he said, straightening his boutonniere. "Katherine looks stunning, just like her mother from the pictures I've seen." "Yes," Michael replied evenly. "Elizabeth would have wanted to be here." Michael watched his son-in-law's face cycle through expressions, denial, anger, and finally, a cold, calculating smile. "Katherine," Jason said, his voice suddenly different, harder, without the warmth he'd always shown her. "You have no idea what you've done." Chaos erupted in the reception hall. The 5-tier wedding cake toppled as Jason shoved past the dessert table, sending white frosting and sugar flowers cascading across the floor. Guests stood frozen, smartphones recording the unfolding drama as the perfect wedding disintegrated. Into nightmare. "You stupid, interfering old man," Jason, or Jeremy, snarled at Michael, his charming facade completely abandoned. "You couldn't just let her be happy, could you?" Katherine stood shell-shocked between them. the marriage certificate still clutched in her trembling hands. "Is it true?" she whispered again, her voice barely audible above the commotion. Jason's eyes darted toward the exits, where his fake parents had already disappeared. "Katie, listen to me," he said, his tone shifting to urgent persuasion. "There are things about my past I couldn't tell you, yes, but everything between us is real." "Answer her question," Michael demanded. "Is your name Jeremy Caldwell? Are you still legally married to Elena?" Elena moved closer, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. "We were married 8 years ago in Chicago," she stated clearly. "He disappeared after embezzling funds from my company. He never filed for divorce." "She's lying," Jason insisted, reaching for Katherine's hand. "Baby, you know me. Whatever documents they've shown you are forgeries. I changed my name years ago to escape an abusive family. I've told you about my childhood." Katherine pulled away from his touch, her eyes wide with betrayal. "You told me your wife died of cancer," she said. "You took me to a grave in Chicago." "A random grave," Elena interjected. "He took me to the same cemetery before we were married, claimed it was his brother." Katherine's brother, Mark, pushed through the crowd, positioning himself protectively beside his sister. "Get away from her," he warned Jason. "This is ridiculous," Jason scoffed, though his eyes continued scanning for escape routes. "Katherine, everything I told you about us was real. Yes, I changed my name. Yes, I had another life before you. But my feelings for you—" "Save it," Mark snapped. "The police are on their way." At the mention of police, Jason's demeanor changed. Instantly, he lunged forward, grabbing Katherine's wrist. "We need to talk privately, now." Michael stepped between them. "Let her go." "This doesn't concern you anymore, old man," Jason hissed, his grip tightening on Katherine. "Katie, if you ever loved me at all, you'll come with me right now. I can explain everything." Katherine stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't even know who you are." "I'm the man you married," Jason insisted. "Whatever came before, you're—" "A liar," she interrupted, her voice gaining strength, "and a thief, and apparently still married." She yanked her arm free, backing away. "Everything you told me was a lie." "Not everything," he insisted, desperation edging into his voice. "Katie—" "Please," Mark's patience snapped. He lunged forward, shoving Jason backward. "She said get away from her." Jason stumbled against a table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. In an instant, his calculated charm vanished completely, replaced by cold fury. He straightened, a dangerous smile spreading across his face. "You have no idea what you've done," he said, eyes sweeping over Katherine, Michael, and Elena. "None of you do." "What I've done," Michael replied steadily, "is protect my daughter from a con man." "Protected her?" Jason laughed bitterly. "You've ruined her life, the whole town watching her humiliation, the marriage annulled before the honeymoon, the gossip that will follow her for years." He turned to Katherine, his voice softening with practiced precision. "I would have made you happy, Katie. Whatever else you believe, know that." "By stealing from her," Elena challenged. "By abandoning her once you'd emptied her accounts, like you did to me, to the others." Jason's expression hardened. "There were no others." "Portland," Elena countered. "Dallas, San Diego." Katherine gasped, recognition flaring in her eyes. "The business trips. You said you were meeting clients in those cities. Setting up our future," Jason attempted, but his lie fell flat. Sirens wailed in the distance. Jason's expression shifted again, calculating odds. The wedding guests had formed a loose circle around the confrontation, blocking obvious exits. Elena stood beside Michael now, a united front of truth against deception. "This isn't over," Jason warned, backing toward the kitchen service entrance. "Katherine, when you realize what a mistake this is, what your father has cost you—" "The only mistake I made," Katherine said clearly, pulling the wedding ring from her finger, "was believing you." As the sirens grew louder, Jason made his move. shoving past a waiter and bolting through the kitchen doors. Mark and several male guests immediately gave chase, their shouts fading as they pursued him into the night. The reception hall emptied gradually, guests departing in hushed groups, their expressions a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. The beautiful barn that had been decorated for celebration now resembled the aftermath of a natural disaster. Overturned centerpieces, abandoned champagne flutes, and Katherine's discarded bouquet lying forgotten beneath the head table. Katherine sat in a corner, surrounded by her mother's sisters and her closest friends. Her wedding dress, carefully preserved from her mother's ceremony and altered for her perfect day, was smeared with cake frosting from when she'd stumbled against the ruins of the dessert table. She stared at nothing, her makeup streaked by tears. She no longer bothered to wipe away. "The police have set up roadblocks," Mark announced, returning from outside. "They'll find him." Michael nodded absently, watching his daughter from across the room. The victory of exposing Jason felt hollow in the face of Katherine's devastation. The wedding planner, Vivian, approached with clipboard in hand, her professional calm admirably intact. "I've arranged for cars to take everyone home," she informed Michael quietly. "And I've spoken with the venue manager. They're willing to give us as much time as needed to collect personal items." "Thank you," Michael said. "I'm sorry about—" He gestured vaguely at the destruction. "Not your fault," Vivian assured him. "In 15 years of planning weddings, I've seen some disasters. But this—" she shook her head. "Your daughter needs you now. The rest is just details." Across the room, Elena stood apart from the others, a solitary figure against the wall. She had given her statement to the police and now seemed uncertain of her place in the aftermath. Michael approached her. "Thank you," he said simply, "for your courage." Elena shook her head. "I should have found him sooner, before it came to this. You did what you could." Michael glanced back at Katherine. "I should go to her." "Of course." Elena hesitated. "Will you tell her I'm sorry? That none of this was what I wanted for her?" "I'll tell her." Michael crossed to where Katherine sat, surrounded by her protective circle of friends and family. They parted silently, leaving father and daughter alone. "Katie," he began gently, taking the seat beside her. "Don't." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Not now. I'm sorry it happened this way. I tried to find a better way to tell you, but what?" Katherine finally looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed but dry now. "But you decided humiliating me in front of everyone I know was the best option." "I tried to talk to you earlier today," Michael protested. "By the oak tree, when you saw me with Elena. But there wasn't time, and Jason was already spinning his lies." "You could have told me days ago," she countered, "when you first suspected, when you first met her." The accusation hung between them, fair and damning. Michael had no defense except the truth. "I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, that he would convince you I was interfering, jealous of your happiness. So instead, you orchestrated a public spectacle." Her voice cracked. "Everyone filming on their phones, posting my humiliation online before I could even process what was happening. Katie, 2 years, Dad." She looked down at her ring finger, now bare. 2 years of my life with a man who apparently never existed. Everything he told me about his childhood, his work, his travels, was it all lies? Was any of it real? Michael couldn't answer, couldn't offer the comfort of certainty. "And the worst part," Katherine continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I still love him, the man I thought he was. How pathetic is that?" "It's not pathetic," Michael said gently. "It's human." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I need to go." "Home?" "Of course, I'll drive you." Katherine shook her head. "No, I need to be alone tonight." "Katie, you shouldn't be alone right now." "I shouldn't be a lot of things right now, Dad." She stood, gathering the stained skirts of her wedding dress. "I shouldn't be humiliated. I shouldn't be married to a con man. I shouldn't be wondering if the last 2 years of my life were just part of someone's elaborate scheme. She looked around at the destroyed reception. But here we are. Sarah, her maid of honor, approached cautiously. My car's outside, Kat. I can take you to my place, or your dad's, or wherever you want to go. Katherine nodded numbly. As they turned to leave, she paused, looking back at her father. Did you ever like him? She asked suddenly. Before all this, did you ever think he was good enough for me? The question caught Michael off guard with its raw vulnerability. I thought he made you happy, he answered honestly. And that was what mattered most. Katherine held his gaze for a long moment, then turned away without another word, leaving Michael standing amid the ruins of her wedding day. 3 days after the wedding disaster, Michael received the call. Jason, or Jeremy, as they now knew him, had been apprehended at a bus station 50 miles north, attempting to flee to Canada. The police wanted Michael and Katherine to come in. They had recovered something they thought might be relevant. The police station was institutional and cold, its fluorescent lights harsh against the beige walls. Detective Rivera led them to an interview room where a black smartphone in an evidence bag lay on the metal table. We found this hidden in the lining of his luggage, Rivera explained. His primary phone was wiped clean, but he apparently forgot. About this backup device, Katherine stared at the phone as if it might bite. What's on it? Records of his activities, bank transfers, identity documents, correspondence with his accomplices. Rivera hesitated. And notes about his marks, including you, Ms. Bennett. Katherine flinched at the clinical term. Can I see? That's why you're here. We need you to identify anything that might help the prosecution. Michael placed a protective hand on Katherine's shoulder. Is this necessary? She's been through enough. Dad, I need to know. Katherine's voice was steadier than it had been in days. I need to understand. Rivera nodded, then asked, would you like to speak with him? He's requesting to talk to both of you before he's transferred to federal custody. Absolutely not, Michael said immediately. Yes, Katherine countered, her eyes never leaving the phone. I have questions only he can answer. 20 minutes later, they sat across from Jason in a visitation room, separated by a scratched plexiglass divider. His designer suit had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit, his confident posture diminished by handcuffs, yet his eyes still held that calculating intelligence that had first drawn Katherine to him. Thank you for coming, he began, his voice lacking the warmth he'd always shown Katherine. This was his real voice, Michael realized. Cool, assessing, practical. Why? Katherine asked simply. Jason, Jeremy, leaned forward slightly. The simplest answer? Money. You had access to your mother's trust fund, your family's connections, your inheritance from your grandmother. Katherine recoiled at his bluntness. But there's more to it, he continued. I select my targets carefully. Women with financial resources, yes, but also specific personality traits. Independence, intelligence, but with a blind spot, usually from past trauma like losing a parent young. Women who trust their own judgment so completely that they don't question inconsistencies. You're saying I was easy to fool? Katherine's voice hardened. No, you were worth the effort of a sophisticated deception. His tone was almost admiring. Harder marks require more elaborate scenarios. I created an entire life that would appeal specifically to you, the grieving widower, the financial success, the perfect balance of vulnerability and strength. Michael's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. And Elena? The others? Jeremy shrugged. Business arrangements that outlived their usefulness. Elena was different. She caught me before I could finish the job. I had to leave with less than I'd planned. How many others? Katherine pressed. 3 complete operations. A few preliminary setups that I abandoned when better opportunities arose. His eyes flicked to Katherine. You were to be the last one, the culmination. With your family's resources, I would have had enough to disappear permanently, establish a legitimate business. You expect us to believe that? Michael scoffed. Believe what you want. But everything I told Katherine about wanting to settle down, start a family, that part was true. Just not with her. Katherine flinched as if slapped. The phone they found. Your notes about me. What do they say? A flicker of something, perhaps genuine regret, crossed Jeremy's face. Nothing you want to read. I need to know. There. Unclinical assessments. Weaknesses to exploit. Financial details to target. He leaned forward. Katherine, whatever you're looking for, closure, understanding, you won't find it in those notes. I compartmentalized. The man who wrote those notes and the man who lived with you were essentially different people. But they were both you, she said quietly. Yes. An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Jeremy spoke again, his voice lower. For what it's worth, and I know it's worth very little, not everything was a lie. I enjoyed our life together. Another reality. He trailed off, then straightened. But that's not who I am. Who are you then? Katherine asked. A man who made choices long ago that defined his path. We all have a story we tell ourselves about who we are. Mine just happens to change depending on what I need. Detective Rivera appeared at the door, signaling their time was ending. One last thing, Jeremy said as they stood to leave. The ring I gave you, it's not worth what I claimed. Like everything else, it was part of the illusion. Katherine met his gaze steadily. That's the difference between us. I never pretended to be something I wasn't. As they walked away, Michael heard Jeremy call after them, Michael, your instincts were right from the beginning. You should have trusted them sooner. Katherine sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by the detritus of a life suddenly revealed as fiction. Wedding gifts still arrived daily. Crystal vases and monogrammed towels for a marriage that had lasted less than 6 hours. She'd stopped opening them. Her wedding dress lay draped across a chair, the torn lace at the hem a physical manifestation of her shattered dreams. She'd yanked at it frantically after returning from the reception, ripping delicate stitches her mother had once walked down the aisle in. Now she couldn't bear to have it cleaned or repaired, but neither could she bring herself to discard it. The doorbell rang, another well-meaning friend with casseroles and concern. Katherine ignored it. The incessant calls and texts had finally slowed, but visitors still appeared, bearing sympathy and barely disguised curiosity. Sarah was the only one she'd allowed inside for more than a few minutes, and even that visit had been brief. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father, checking in, love you. She set it aside without responding. Their relationship existed in a strange limbo, gratitude for his intervention warring with resentment for its public nature. She understood his actions had saved her from worse heartbreak, but understanding didn't ease the humiliation. Katherine moved to the kitchen, mechanically making tea she wouldn't drink. She caught her reflection in the microwave door. Hollow. Eyes, unwashed hair. A stranger looking back at her. Had Jeremy seen this version of her coming? Had he calculated what his betrayal would reduce her to? The kettle whistled, startling her from dark thoughts. As she poured the water, her gaze fell on a framed photo of her and Jason in Aspen last winter, his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing in the snow. She'd left the pictures up, unable to decide if they represented genuine moments or simply scenes in his elaborate performance. Was any of it real? The question haunted her. The detective had shown her entries from Jeremy's hidden phone. Clinical. Notes about her vulnerabilities. Reminders of anniversaries and preferences. Observations about her financial assets. Even her habit of leaving her laptop password on a sticky note hidden under her keyboard had been documented as a potential access point. The tea grew cold as Katherine stood staring at nothing, lost in memory. Their first date at that French bistro downtown, weekend trips to the coast, the night he'd proposed at her favorite overlook in the mountains. His face, when she'd walked down the aisle toward him, had that joy been genuine or just another calculated expression? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Katie? It's Mark. I know you're in there. Her brother's voice held none of the tentative sympathy of other visitors. Katherine hesitated, then moved to the door, opening it just enough to see him. "What?" Her voice was rough from disuse. Mark pushed past her into the apartment, surveying the unwashed dishes and unopened mail, with a frown. "This is getting ridiculous. Did Dad send you? Dad's too afraid of upsetting you further." Mark turned to face her. "I'm not." Katherine crossed her arms defensively. "I'm allowed to grieve." "Grieve, yes. Wallow indefinitely, no." Mark picked up the photo of her and Jason, studying it. "How long are you going to let that bastard steal from your life? He already took 2 years. Are you going to give him more? It's not that simple." "Actually, it is. He's a con man. Everything was a lie. End of story." Katherine snatched the photo from his hands. "You don't understand. I lived with him. I loved him. I can't just delete that." Mark's expression softened slightly. "I'm not saying you can, but Katie, you have to start moving forward." "How?" The question escaped as barely a whisper. "How do I trust my own judgment again? I brought him into our lives. I defended him when Sarah questioned his stories. Her voice broke. "I slept beside him for 2 years, Mark. I shared everything with him, and he took advantage of that trust. That's on him, not you." Katherine sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "Do you know what the worst part is? I still catch myself thinking of things to tell him. Funny stories from work, observations about people we knew. For a split second I forget, and then it hits me all over again. That person never existed." Mark sat beside her, uncharacteristically gentle. "The person you were with him existed. Your feelings were real. That matters, Katie, does it? When it was all based on lies." "As would my parents," Jason countered, his eyes challenging. Then, lowering his voice, "Is something bothering you, Michael? You've seemed distracted today." "Just emotional," Michael replied. "It's a big day." "Indeed it is." Jason clasped Michael's shoulder, his grip slightly too firm. "A new beginning for all of us, as family." The presumption, the sheer gall, nearly broke Michael's composure. But he merely nodded, watching as Jason returned to Katherine's side, sliding an arm around her waist with practiced possessiveness. The bridal party departed in decorated cars, heading to the barn reception venue at Rosewood Farm. Michael followed. In his own vehicle, Elena's wedding ring heavy in his pocket alongside the evidence that would shatter his daughter's world. Rosewood Farm's restored barn glowed with string lights and floral arrangements as guests began to arrive for the reception. Rustic elegance was the theme, Katherine's vision brought to life with wooden farm tables, crystal glassware, and lavender centerpieces. A jazz quartet played softly as waitstaff circulated with champagne. Michael stood near the head table, reviewing his handwritten speech notes, the words he'd prepared weeks ago, warm anecdotes about Katherine's childhood, wisdom about marriage, a welcome to Jason, now seemed like artifacts from another life. He'd crossed out entire paragraphs, scribbling new thoughts in the margins, uncertain how to begin a speech that would end so differently than anyone expected. 20 minutes until the wedding party arrives," the coordinator informed him, adjusting place cards at the head table. Michael nodded, slipping the notes into his pocket beside the manila envelope. Inside were copies of the incriminating documents. The marriage certificate proving Jason was still legally married to Eleanor, photographs of Jeremy Caldwell's criminal record, evidence of his pattern of fraud. Frank had delivered it that morning, organized chronologically for maximum impact. Drinking before the speech? Smart man. Michael turned to find his brother-in-law, David, offering a glass of scotch. Katherine's uncle had flown in from Seattle. "For the wedding." "Thanks." Michael accepted the drink, grateful for the burn of alcohol. "How's Sandra holding up?" "My sister's in her element, fussing over Katherine's dress, coordinating with photographers." David studied Michael's face. "You, on the other hand, look like you're attending a funeral rather than a wedding." Michael forced a smile. Just the usual father of the bride emotions. Right. David's expression suggested he wasn't convinced. Listen, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but Mr. Bennett, a server interrupted, there's a woman asking to speak with you privately. She says it's urgent. Michael's pulse quickened. Where? By the east entrance. David raised an eyebrow. Problem? Hopefully not. Save my spot. Michael set down his untouched scotch and made his way through the growing crowd. Elena waited in the shadow of an oak tree, her blue dress replaced with a more formal black one for the reception. She looked calm, but resolute. I wasn't sure you'd go through with it, she said when he approached. Neither was I, until I saw him kiss her at the altar while you watched from the back. Michael's voice was tight. Did anyone recognize you at the church? No, I stayed hidden, left before the receiving line. She glanced toward the barn. I'll remain out of sight until you signal. Where will you do it? After my speech. I'll call him out, present the evidence, then signal you. Elena nodded, twisting her wedding ring, the real one she'd kept all these years. And Katherine, how will you protect her when it happens? The question hit Michael like a physical blow. In all his planning, he'd focused on exposing Jason, not on the immediate aftermath for his daughter. I don't know, he admitted. It will devastate her either way. I've been where she is, Eleanor said softly. The public humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal. If I could have learned the truth privately, she trailed off, then squared her shoulders. But it's too late for that now. Michael checked his watch. They'll be arriving soon. You should... Dad? Michael froze at Katherine's voice. He turned to find his daughter standing just yards away, her wedding dress catching the golden hour. Light, she must have arrived early, separate from the main wedding party. Katie, he managed, stepping away from Elena. I thought you were still taking photos at the church. Katherine's eyes moved from her father to the stranger in the black dress. Who is this? She asked, her voice suddenly small with suspicion. Before Michael could answer, a sleek black car pulled up to the main entrance. Jason emerged, scanning the grounds until he spotted the tableau. Michael, Eleanor, and Katherine locked in a moment of suspended tension. Even from a distance, Michael saw the blood drain from Jason's face as he recognized Elena. For the first time, the perfect mask slipped, revealing naked panic beneath. Dad, what's going on? Katherine asked, her eyes now fixed on Jason's reaction. Why does my husband look like he's seen a ghost? Michael reached for the envelope in his pocket, the marriage certificate suddenly heavy as lead. Katie, there's something you need to know about Jason. The reception was in full swing, champagne flowing and music playing, but an undercurrent of tension electrified the air. Michael sat at the head table watching Jason charm the guests with practiced ease. Beside him, Katherine maintained a brittle smile, her eyes occasionally darting to her father with questions he had promised to answer after the reception. That confrontation by the oak tree had been interrupted by the arrival of the bridal party. Jason had recovered quickly, introducing Elena as an old family friend with such conviction that even Michael almost believed it. Katherine, caught in the whirlwind of arriving guests and photography, had reluctantly accepted the explanation for the moment, but the seed of doubt was planted. Now, as dinner plates were cleared and the DJ announced it was time for speeches, Michael rose from his seat, clutching his wrinkled notes. The microphone felt heavy in his hand. Across the room, Eleanor stood in the shadows, watching. Jason's eyes tracked her movements, his expression carefully neutral despite the threat she represented. For those who don't know me, I'm Michael Bennett, Katherine's father, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. When Elizabeth and I welcomed our daughter into the world 32 years ago, I made a promise to always protect her, to always tell her the truth, even when that truth was difficult to hear. He paused, meeting Katherine's eyes. Confusion flickered across her face at this unexpected opening. Katie has always had an extraordinary capacity for love and trust. As a child, she believed in fairy tales and happy endings. As her father, I wanted those things for her too. Michael glanced down at his speech notes. The original version, with its warm anecdotes and blessings now crossed out, rewritten in the margins, with the harder truths he had to deliver. When Katie brought Jason home 2 years ago, I wanted to believe he was everything he claimed to be. The man who would make my daughter happy, the man who had suffered his own losses and understood the value of family. Jason shifted in his seat, his hand covering Katherine's on the table, a gesture that once seemed affectionate but now looked possessive to Michael's eyes. But a father's job isn't just to believe in fairy tales. It's to protect his child from those who would take advantage of her generous heart. Murmurs rippled through the reception hall. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew the manila envelope. "I've never been one for public scenes," he continued, his voice dropping lower, forcing the guests to lean forward. "But sometimes, protecting those we love means standing up even when it's difficult, even when it will cause pain." Katherine's face had gone pale. "Dad," she said, the word barely audible, "Jason Coulter is not the man he has presented himself to be." Michael opened the envelope, removing the marriage certificate. "His real name is Jeremy Caldwell. He is currently wanted in Illinois for fraud and embezzlement, and he is still legally married to his first wife." Gasps erupted around the room. Jason's face hardened, the charming mask slipping to reveal cold calculation beneath. "That's absurd," Jason said loudly, standing. "Michael, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is completely inappropriate. The woman you claim died of cancer 5 years ago is very much alive," Michael continued, his voice rising to cut through Jason's protest. He turned toward the back of the room. "Elena?" Elena stepped forward from the shadows, her presence causing another wave of shocked whispers. "Hello, Jeremy," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Katherine stared at Elena, then at Jason, then at the document in her father's hand. "What is this? What's happening?" "Your father is confused," Jason said quickly, gripping Katherine's shoulders. "This woman is delusional. She's been stalking me for years, claiming we were married." "We have proof," Michael interrupted, holding up the marriage certificate. "Authenticated records, police reports, financial documents showing his pattern of marrying women, gaining access to their finances, and disappearing." Jason's eyes darted around the room, calculating odds, escape routes. His parents were already edging toward the exit. Katherine pulled away from Jason's grasp, reaching for the certificate with trembling hands. As she read, her expression crumpled. "Is this true?" she whispered, looking up at the man she had married hours earlier. "Is your name Jeremy? Is she your wife?" The room held its breath, waiting for Jason's response. "I've made a decision. I'm going to meet with the other women. Elena's coordinating it. We're talking about starting a support group, maybe even an awareness campaign about romance scams." Michael nodded encouragingly. "That sounds like a good idea. And I'm thinking of moving, just temporarily. Mark's offered his guest room while I figure things out." She hesitated. "Too many memories in my apartment." "Whatever you need, Katie." She smiled faintly. "What I need is to stop hearing that question everyone keeps asking. Which one? Were there signs? Did you suspect anything?" Her frustration was evident, as if I knowingly walked into this disaster. "People are trying to reassure themselves it couldn't happen to them," Michael observed. "That they'd be smarter, more perceptive. But it could happen to anyone. That's the terrifying part." Katherine stared into the distance. "He chose his victims carefully, successful independent women with some financial stability, women who prided themselves on good judgment." "And who had experienced loss," Michael added quietly. Katherine nodded. "Creating a connection through shared grief. It was brilliant in a terrible way. He knew exactly how to bypass my defenses." Michael squeezed her hand. "You're going to get through this. We both are." For the first time in weeks, Katherine's smile reached her eyes. "I know. Bennett resilience, right? Mom used to say we were too stubborn to stay down for long." "She was right about that," Michael gestured toward the house. "Come inside, I can make breakfast." "I'd like that." Katherine stood, gathering their empty cups. "And Dad? Thank you for everything." The cafe Elena had suggested for their meeting was tucked away on a quiet side street, far from the busier parts of town where Katherine might be recognized. Katherine arrived early, choosing a corner table with her back to the wall, a new habit born of feeling exposed, vulnerable. Elena entered precisely on time, dressed simply in jeans and a blue blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried a worn leather journal under her arm. "Thank you for meeting me," Elena said, as she slid into the seat opposite Katherine. "I think we have a lot to talk about." Katherine studied the woman who was, technically, married to the same man she had briefly wed. In another reality, they might have hated each other, rivals, competitors. Instead, they shared the strange bond of common deception. After ordering coffee, an awkward silence settled between them. Katherine broke it first. "How did you meet him?" Elena's fingers tapped lightly on the journal. "A charity gala in Chicago. I was representing my firm. We were sponsoring a scholarship program for underprivileged youth." A sad smile touched her lips. "Jeremy was charming, attentive. He seemed genuinely interested in my work with financial literacy for low-income families." "That sounds familiar." Katherine nodded. "He had a way of making you feel like the most fascinating person he'd ever met." "Yes, and vulnerable too." Elena met Katherine's eyes directly. "I lost my father the year before we met. Jeremy told me he'd lost his mother to cancer, creating a connection through shared grief," Katherine finished. "He used the same approach with me. My mother died when I was in college." Elena nodded. "He studies his targets carefully, finds the emotional entry point." "Targets," Katherine repeated the word, still struggling with its clinical implication. "Is that how you think of us now?" "It's how he thought of us," Elena corrected gently. "In his notes, his plans. But we are much more than that." She placed the journal on the table between them. "I started this after he disappeared. At first, it was to document everything I could remember. Conversations, inconsistencies I'd overlooked, financial movements. I thought it might help the police find him." "And did it?" "Not directly, but it helped me process what happened, understand the patterns." Elena pushed the journal toward Katherine. "I thought it might help you too." Katherine hesitated before touching it. "I'm not sure I want to relive those memories." "Not to relive them, to reclaim them." Elena's voice gained intensity. "That's what he takes from us, not just money, but our trust in our own perceptions, our own memories. He makes us doubt everything we thought we knew." Katherine nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in Elena's words. "How long did it take to feel normal again?" "I'm still working on it," Elena admitted. 5 years later, I still have moments of doubt when I meet someone new, but it gets better." She sipped her coffee. "The journal helped, so did therapy, and eventually finding purpose in tracking him, trying to prevent him from hurting others. Is that why you've been following him for 5 years? At first it was anger. I wanted justice, restitution, but over time it became something else." Elena's expression softened. "I couldn't save myself from him, but maybe I could save someone else." "You tried to warn me," Katherine acknowledged. "The anonymous letter to my father. I wasn't sure you'd believe me directly. People rarely do." Elena's eyes held no judgment. "We all think we're too smart to be fooled that way." Katherine opened the journal, flipping through pages of neat handwriting interspersed with newspaper clippings, financial documents, and photographs. A comprehensive record of betrayal and its aftermath. "Tell me about the others," she requested. "The women in the police photos." Elena nodded. "Melissa in Portland, an architect. He was Daniel Green then. Caroline in Dallas, a pediatrician. He went by Thomas Whitaker. Each time he refined his approach, learned from previous experiences, and each time he left them with nothing." Not nothing, Elena corrected. Changed, yes, wounded, certainly, but never destroyed. That's important to remember. Katherine closed the journal, pushing it back toward Elena. Keep it. I need to write my own story. That's exactly right. Elena smiled with genuine warmth. Our stories don't end with him. The support group you mentioned, for his victims, when does it meet? Next Tuesday. 7 women have confirmed, including us. Katherine nodded decisively. I'll be there. And I've been thinking about what you said about creating awareness. I'm a graphic designer. I could help develop materials, a website maybe. That would be perfect. Elena hesitated, then added, You know, in his own twisted way, Jeremy brought us together, women who might never have connected otherwise. There's a certain poetic justice in using that connection against him. For the first time in weeks, Katherine felt something like her old professional confidence returning. He underestimated us. All of us. That was his biggest mistake. Eleanor agreed. He saw us as isolated targets. He never considered we might become allies. As they parted outside the cafe, Katherine impulsively hugged Eleanor. Thank you for the warning, for your persistence, even if I wasn't ready to hear it then. That's what survivors do, Elena replied simply. We look out for each other. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, Michael drove through an unfamiliar neighborhood in Portland, checking house numbers against the address Katherine had texted him. When he found the small craftsman bungalow with its freshly painted blue door, he smiled at the wind chimes hanging from the porch, identical to the ones Elizabeth had loved at their first home. Katherine greeted him on the porch, keys in hand. You found it. GPS. Michael tapped his phone. Technology has its uses. Come see inside before the movers arrive with my furniture. She dangled a set of new house keys, the brass still unmarked and shiny. First-time homeowner, Dad. Can you believe it? The house was modest but charming. Hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, a bay window overlooking a small garden. Katherine led the tour with obvious pride, pointing out the office space where she'd run her freelance design business and the spare room that would become a guest bedroom for when you visit. It's perfect, Katie, Michael said, meaning it. The house suited her, practical yet warm, independent yet welcoming. The support group meets here twice a month now, she explained, as they settled in the kitchen with coffee. We've grown to 12 members, not all Jeremy's victims, but women with similar experiences. Having a dedicated space helps it feel more official. Michael nodded, noting how confidently she referenced the group, how naturally she referred to Jeremy by his real name now. The healing process had been gradual but steady, moving to Portland for a fresh start, establishing her design business, focusing on non-profit clients, and most importantly, founding the support network with Eleanor. How's the court case progressing? He asked. Final sentencing next month. With the additional victims who've come forward, the prosecutor thinks he'll get the maximum. Katherine's expression remained steady. I'll be there to give my impact statement. Want company? Elena's driving down with me. She smiled at his raised eyebrow. Strange friendship, I know, but it works. Not strange at all, Michael countered. You've both been through something few people can understand. Katherine nodded. The website launches next week. Truth After Deception. Resources for people recovering from relationship fraud, warning signs, support group information. Elena's handling the financial literacy component, and I've designed everything. Pride swelled in Michael's chest. 6 months ago, Katherine had been shattered by betrayal, questioning her judgment and withdrawing from the world. Now she had transformed that pain into purpose. I brought something for your housewarming, Michael said, retrieving a package from his coat. You weren't a lie. Your capacity for love, your loyalty, your trust, those are real. He hesitated. And Dad's love for you is real too. He's hurting, watching you shut everyone out. Katherine stared down at the photo in her hands. With sudden decision, she crossed to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and dropped the frame inside, closing it firmly. I'm not ready to talk to him yet, she said finally. "But I will be. I just need time." Mark nodded. "Fair enough. In the meantime, shower and get dressed. We're going out. Mark, I don't want... Not negotiable. You need sunlight and food that doesn't come in a delivery bag." He stood, a stubborn set to his jaw that reminded her of their father. "I'll wait." For the first time in days, Katherine felt something other than grief stir within her. A flicker of her old self responding to her brother's familiar bossiness. "Fine," she conceded, "but no restaurants, no places people know me." "Deal." Mark watched as she moved toward the bathroom, then called after her, "Katie, it gets better. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it does get better." The county courthouse loomed against the autumn sky, its granite facade imposing as Katherine climbed the steps beside her father. 2 weeks had passed since her first halting outing with Mark. Now, dressed in a simple navy suit, she steeled herself for the preliminary hearing in Jeremy's case. Detective Rivera met them in the lobby, her badge gleaming against her dark blazer. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming." She led them through security. "The prosecutor wants to speak with you before the proceedings." Katherine nodded, following mechanically. The courthouse corridors echoed with footsteps and muted conversations, ordinary people handling ordinary legal matters. She envied their normalcy. Her own situation had made the local news, then regional, then a brief mention on a national morning. Chota wedding day revelation. Bride discovers groom's secret life. In a small conference room, Assistant District Attorney Phillips shuffled papers while explaining the charges. Fraud, identity theft, falsification of documents, bigamy, and grand larceny. With his prior record, we're looking at significant time. "What about his accomplices?" Michael asked. "The actors playing his parents. Robert and Margaret Smith, their real names, are cooperating. Small-time players in the scheme. They'll face lesser charges." Phillips turned to Katherine. "Ms. Bennett, your testimony will be crucial for the bigamy charge." Katherine stared at the polished table. "What exactly will I need to say?" "Just establish the facts of your relationship and marriage. Ms. Vasquez, his legal wife, will testify about their prior marriage." "And he can't talk his way out of this?" Katherine's voice held a hint of her old dry humor. "He's very convincing." Phillips smiled grimly. "Not this time. The evidence is overwhelming." As they entered the courtroom, Katherine faltered at the sight of Elena Vasquez sitting in the front row. The woman turned, offering a small, understanding nod. Katherine returned it, hesitantly. They shared an unwanted bond, both victims of the same man's deception. When the bailiff called, "All rise," Katherine's heart hammered painfully. Jeremy entered in handcuffs, the orange jumpsuit replaced with a subdued grey suit. His lawyers attempt to present him respectably to the court. His eyes found Katherine immediately, his expression unreadable. The proceedings moved with formal precision. Charges read, pleas entered, bail denied, given the flight risk. Katherine listened with detached interest until the prosecutor called her name to establish the facts of her relationship with the defendant. On the witness stand, Katherine kept her responses clear and concise. Yes, they had met 2 years ago. Yes, he had presented himself as Jason Coulter, a widower. Yes, they had legally married, though the marriage was now in annulment proceedings. "And were you aware the defendant was already legally married when he married you?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Katherine replied, her voice steady. "I believed his first wife had died of cancer 5 years earlier." "And had you known he was already married, would you have proceeded with your wedding?" "Objection speculative," Jeremy's attorney called. "Sustained," the judge ruled. "No further questions," the prosecutor concluded. Jeremy's attorney declined. To cross-examine, a tactical decision Katherine found oddly disappointing. Part of her had wanted to confront Jeremy's lies directly, to challenge him through his lawyer's questions. When Eleanor took the stand, Katherine watched the other woman's composed testimony with growing respect. Eleanor described her marriage to Jeremy Caldwell, his embezzlement from her firm, his disappearance, and her years-long search for justice. Her dignity in the face of public scrutiny was remarkable. After the hearing concluded with the case bound over for trial, Katherine found herself beside Elena outside the courthouse. That was difficult, Katherine offered awkwardly. Elena nodded. But necessary. Does it get easier, moving forward after something like this? Not easier, Elena considered. Different. The pain changes shape. Detective Rivera approached, interrupting their conversation. We found something you should know about. Could you both come to the station tomorrow? The following morning, Katherine and Elena sat side by side as Rivera spread photographs across the conference table. Women's faces, smiling, trusting, unknowing. 7 victims that we've identified so far, Rivera explained. Each with the same pattern. Only you two escaped before he could complete his financial extraction. These poor women, Elena murmured. Actually, Rivera said, we have you both to thank for finding them. The records on Jeremy's hidden phone led us to his previous identities. We've contacted all the victims. They're willing to testify. Katherine stared at the photographs. Women of different ages and backgrounds, all marked by the same man. A strange solidarity formed in her chest. We need to help them. Elena nodded in agreement. Together. For the first time since her wedding day, Katherine felt something like purpose return. Jeremy had chosen his victims for their isolation, their self-reliance, their unwillingness to share vulnerabilities, but in doing so, he had inadvertently created a powerful alliance against him. The morning after the preliminary hearing, Michael stood on his porch, watching the sunrise paint, the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Sleep had eluded him, his mind replaying Katherine's composed testimony, her quiet dignity in the face of public scrutiny. Pride mingled with lingering guilt. He had protected her from worse harm, but at what emotional cost? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke his reverie. Katherine stepped out, 2 coffee cups in hand. She'd called last night asking if she could come by this morning, her first voluntary contact since the wedding. Hi, Dad. She handed him one of the cups, his usual order from their favorite coffee shop. Peace offering. Michael accepted it gratefully, noting the dark circles under her eyes. You didn't sleep either? Not much. Katherine settled into one of the porch chairs. Been thinking about yesterday, about Elena and the other women. They sat in companionable silence, sipping coffee as the neighborhood awakened around them. A sprinkler started across the street. A dog barked 2 houses down. Normal life continuing, even as theirs had been upended. I owe you an apology, Katherine said finally. Michael shook his head. You don't owe me anything, Katie. I do. I shut you out when you were only trying to protect me. She stared into her coffee. I was angry that you exposed Jason publicly, but the truth is, I was more angry at myself for not seeing through him, for bringing him into our lives. He was a professional con artist, sweetheart. He fooled everyone, not you. Katherine met his eyes. You suspected something all along, didn't you? Michael considered his response carefully. I had doubts, small inconsistencies in his stories, but mostly it was instinct, something I couldn't quite define. Your cop instincts. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I should have paid more attention, and I should have found a better way to tell you. Michael set his cup down. I was so focused on gathering evidence, on making sure you'd believe me that I didn't consider how public exposure would affect you. Katherine's fingers traced the rim of her cup. Would I have believed you? If you'd come to me privately with your suspicions before the wedding? The question hung between them, impossible to answer with certainty. Michael thought of Jason's, Jeremy's, skill at manipulation, his ability to explain away inconsistencies. I don't know, he admitted. That's what frightened me most. Katherine nodded slowly. I've been asking myself the same question. And honestly, I'm not sure I would have. I was so in love with him, or who I thought he was. From inside the house came the sound of the landline ringing. Michael ignored it, focusing on his daughter. I found an old photo album yesterday, Katherine continued. From my high school graduation. Mum had been gone 3 years by then, but you made sure the day was special. Michael remembered the struggle to handle both practical and emotional aspects of parenting alone, his determination that Katherine wouldn't feel her mother's absence too keenly on important days. "You've always protected me," she said softly, "even when I didn't appreciate it." "That's the job," Michael replied simply. Katherine reached across the space between them, taking his hand. "I'm sorry I shut you out, and I'm sorry for how everything unfolded." They lapsed into silence again, but the tension between them had eased, replaced by the familiar comfort of family. Eventually, Katherine straightened. Katherine unwrapped it carefully to find a familiar wooden music box, the one from her childhood that had played Claire de Lune while a ballerina twirled. "Dad," her voice caught. "I thought this was lost in the move. Found it in the attic. Last month. Got the mechanism repaired." He opened the lid, and the sweet, familiar melody filled the kitchen. "Your mother wanted you to have this when you had your first real home. Seems like the right time." Katherine ran her fingers over the carved roses, memories evident in her expression. "It's perfect. Thank you." Later, as they sat on the front porch waiting for the moving truck, Katherine broke a comfortable silence. "I had dinner with someone last week." Michael kept his expression carefully neutral. "Oh? Just dinner. A colleague from the non-profit coalition." She twisted her hands slightly. "It was nice, ordinary. I didn't spend the whole time second-guessing everything he said." "That's progress." "It is." She looked out at the quiet street. "I'm not ready for anything serious. Might not be for a long time. But it felt good to realize I'm not completely closed off to the possibility." Michael nodded, understanding the significance of this small step. "Your mother used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about not letting fear make your decisions for you." She was smart, wasn't she? Katherine smiled. "I wish I remembered her better. You're more like her than you know. The way you've handled all this, she would have been proud." A moving truck rounded the corner, slowing as it approached the house. "Here we go." Katherine stood, keys in hand. "New chapter." Michael watched as his daughter directed the movers, with confident efficiency, noting how she laughed at something one of them said, an easy, unguarded laugh he hadn't heard in months. The pain wasn't gone, might never be completely gone, but it no longer defined her. As Katherine turned to wave him over, sunlight caught the key ring in her hand, making the new house keys gleam like a promise. Not just a house, Michael realized, but a reclamation of independence, of trust in her own judgment, of the future Jeremy had tried to steal. "Coming, Dad." Michael joined his daughter at the threshold of her new home. "Lead the way, Katie. I'm right behind you."